being haunted and things like that. And her mother also thought it was haunted, and I knew her mom. I met her mom. And one night, we're going to bed, and I go, okay, I'm just going to fall asleep on the couch. And she's like, okay, good night, and she goes upstairs. Now, I have this thing where I don't like couches that are in the middle of a living room. I don't like being around where something can, like, come up over the couch from behind. I like my couches to be against the wall. But it wasn't my house. What am I going to do? Rearrange her couch. I fall asleep on the couch. I wake up in the middle of the night. Now, I'm not going to say it was 3 in the morning, the witching hour, but it was quite late. I woke up with a start, like something just, and I'm laying down on the couch, I'm laying down on my side, and I remember waking up and almost instantly popping up. So I'm laying down on the couch sideways, and something wakes me up, and all of a sudden I'm sitting up on the couch and my feet are touching the ground. So it's just like this one movement up, and the living room was completely silent. And I heard what could only be, this is going to sound so ridiculous, and again, if you guys don't believe me, I understand, but I heard what sounded like a creepy, deep laugh. Like and the living room wasn't, I remember this vividly, the living room wasn't like pitch black. I remember the living room was lit up with the little blue electronic lights that you'd see on like a VCR or a microwave light, microwave display, stuff like that. It wasn't completely pitch black, but it wasn't, not everything was visible. But I had enough light to see details in the living room. And I sat up and I heard I sat there perfectly still. And the only way I can describe it, it's going to be hard to do over the podcast, but I'm sitting up and there's nothing, there's nothing behind the couch. Like the couch is just sitting in the middle of the living room. And it was like if you're sitting in a chair and someone passed their hand. So imagine you're sitting in a chair in the middle of a room. Imagine if someone was standing behind you and put their arm straight out and then moved their arm over your head just enough that you see their hand moving from one side to the other. So you knew there was someone behind you, and someone was standing behind you with arm perfectly extended, palm down, and they move their hand from one side to another, like over your head, just enough that you can see the fingers. That's what I saw. I just saw a hand kind of appear right over my right, like from the vision of my right eye, and then just move like someone was passing their hand over the top of my head, but just enough that I could see the hand. And again, I can't even think of words to describe the hand. I mean, it looked like a normal 5. It didn't seem like a shadow person's hand. I just can't think of a word to describe. It was unearthly, obviously. It wasn't a human. And I could tell it wasn't a human. And I sat there in her living room, and I go, Dana? 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 And I'm waiting to hear her say something. She's upstairs. And I'm being much louder than I am on the podcast. And I have my backpack. And I get up. And I grab my backpack. And at this point, I'm yelling, Dana, Dana, I'm leaving. The door's going to be unlocked. Which probably isn't the smartest thing to yell. But I'm going, Dana, I'm leaving. The door's going to be unlocked, but I have to get out of here. Me thinking that if she just heard me yelling Dana a couple of times, she just didn't think anything of it, or she was just kind of waking up. Now I'm saying, I'm out. Your front door's going to be unlocked. This is, it wasn't the best area. We're in Antelope now, actually, where she was at, so it was better than Orangevale, but I'm like, and I'm saying this as I'm leaving the house, because I don't want to be there anymore. And I shut her door, and I leave. I go home, and I was at my grandma's house at this time, so again, that's where all that other shadow stuff was happening. I go home. I get a call like at 6 or 7 in the morning, and it's Dana, and she goes, dude, where are you? Because we were going to hang out the next day. She's like, dude, where are you? What's going on? I go, dude, I'm home. I came home, dude. Your house was way too creepy. I couldn't be there. And she's like, what's going on? I ended up driving back out there to talk to her in person. I said, dude, so here's what happened. And I told her the story I just told you. I said, I'm sitting here. Something woke me up. I heard this laugh. I saw this hand pass over the top of my head. And she's not interrupting me. She's just looking at me the whole time. And I go, and then I yelled your name like 3 times and you didn't respond. And then I said, hey, I'm leaving, like as loud as I could. Your front door's unlocked. And I left. And she waited till I got done telling the story, and she looks at me and she goes, that's impossible, Jason. It's impossible. What do you mean? She goes, if you had yelled my name, I would have heard it. And I'm like, I yelled your name. She goes, you might have yelled my name. You probably did. But she says, you can hear the way that the living room and the house was just built. It was like a tract home. It was like a cookie cutter home. She said the way it was built was that there was a vent that went from the kitchen right into her bedroom. And she goes, I can smell what my mom's cooking through the vent. She goes, sometimes if I listen closely enough, I can hear the grease crackle in the frying pan from my bedroom because the acoustics through that vent are that good. She said, there is no way that I shouldn't have been able to hear you yell. And she goes, and even if I didn't, even if I was dead asleep, she said, my bird, my pet bird, wakes up at literally any noise whatsoever, and it's magnified for that bird. She goes, if I'm downstairs and I say the bird's name, upstairs he will start cawing or doing whatever birds do. Because she goes, there is no way you could have yelled my name and I didn't wake up, and especially for my bird not to have just totally lost it because someone's screaming my name. Because I say the bird's name downstairs, the bird will respond upstairs because it hears me. And I remember we talked about it for a while because she believed that I did that. The question was, why didn't she hear it? And why didn't the bird hear it with these acoustics? The idea of a ghost being able to mimic your voice is creepy enough. But the ability to silence you is terrifying. The idea that when you go ghost hunting, if I go, hey guys, let's stay in a group, let's not split up when we're in this area. But then for whatever reason, you don't split up. You simply go into a room. You go, hey, I'm going to check out in here, and someone else is outside that room. The idea that then you could be begging for your life, and the person right outside that room doesn't hear anything. Or you're in a forest, and you slightly get separated for whatever reason. And something happens to them, and they're screaming for help, screaming for assistance. And the other people are completely oblivious. It's not outside the realm of possibility when you're talking about any sort, because sound is basically energy. It's waves. And if you're able to disrupt those waves, you can disrupt the message. Sound is something that we take for granted. We think if someone's in the next room and they cry out for help, you should be able to hear them. It's simply a sound wave coming through a wall. But there is something out there that can disrupt that sound wave. There is something out there that can make the loudest cry for help completely silent to even the most sensitive ears. You're never safe from these things. And when they want to silence you, they can and they will. DeadRabbitRadio@gmail.com is going to be our email address. You can also hit us up at Facebook.com/DeadRabbitRadio. Twitter is @JasonOCarpenter. Everything I said was true. Everything I said was true. I always want to end on that when I do these personal stories. Twitter is @JasonOCarpenter. Dead Rabbit Radio is the daily paranormal, conspiracy, and true crime podcast. You don't have to listen to it every day, but I'm glad you listened to it today. Have a great weekend, guys. Welcome back to another episode of Dead Rabbit Radio Classics, where we take a look at some episodes you may have missed with a little bit of intro to begin with. Now, this episode is probably one of my most famous episodes. I've referenced it a lot on the show. It created a reoccurring character, but man, this episode was really, really hard to do. This episode followed up the Vampire Sex Cult to Yerba Buena, which was, I did spend about a week kind of plotting it in my head, how I wanted to tell the story and things like that. So when I sat down on the mic, it just came right out. This story was the opposite. I had done way more research than I had for the Vampire Sex Cult, because there really wasn't much information for that story. This one, this guy, Hans, he has a ton of videos. This was recommended to me via Gmail from a guy named Matthew. And it was so dense. I really, really appreciate it. It ended up being one of the best episodes I've ever recorded. But it was so dense, and really the information came down to this. A lunatic, I shouldn't say that, an alleged lunatic believes a weird thing. And these episodes are really, really hard to do, because it's basically just a list of insane statements. And what happened was, I remember vividly recording this episode. First episode where new news is a thing. And new news came about because I was really having a hard time finding stories that I had time to research, because I had some work thing going on. I think I make a reference to that in the episode. I remember being pressed for time, so when I found this folder called New News on my computer, which was all these old articles, I was like, oh, this is perfect. I don't have to, do a bunch of research. It's just one article, and I'll tell this funny story. This episode was the first installment of New News, and I had a dueling story that went on for about a half hour. The version you're going to get is maybe like 8 minutes, but I actually went on and on and on about all these other duels. And it was, I just chopped it all out. The story about the guy, I'm not going to ruin the other story. There's a second story, a true crime story, which is it's a great Dead Rabbit Radio moment. It's horrible tragedy for the people involved, but a great story. But when I started recording the segment for Monkeys Don't Exist, it was basically just me listing off, isn't this wacky, this guy believes this thing, and this thing, and this thing, and this thing. And I remember recording it and thinking, this sucks. This is just me listing off facts, so I'm going to re-record this. So I went back and I re-recorded it, and I was a list of fact and a joke, and a fact and a fact and a joke, and I couldn't stand it. So boring. And I'm thinking, is it the problem with the information, or is it the problem with my presentation? I remember at a certain point shutting off my microphone and sitting back in my chair and thinking, I can't tell this story. I can't tell this story. I have an episode due in a couple hours. I can't tell this story. And I sat in my living room in silence for for quite a long time. Probably not longer than an hour, but for a long time. I just kind of sat there. And then I thought, what if I have the person himself present the information? What if I create this person I'm having a conversation with? Which I was loath to do. Now I can do it, but at the time I was not a fan of gimmicky stuff. I tell jokes, obviously, and things like that, but the idea of, interviewing myself, and it just seemed super gimmicky. The joy you hear me, the giggling at me, laughing at my own jokes, me can barely getting through a sentence when I'm describing the beliefs of Hans, that is pure elation, because what happened was, as I was recording it, I was in a state of ecstasy. Because this episode, easily, recording-wise, it took me the longest to record. Hands down. I have never spent more time recording an episode. All in all, I probably spent about 2.5 hours from the time I hit the mic to the time I started to edit it, simply recording and deleting and recording and deleting. This is the longest episode I've ever done. And when I listen to it, it gives a big smile to my face, because I remember just the utter frustration I had trying to get this information across to you in an entertaining way. So, I want to present to you the episode Monkeys Don't Exist. I think it's one of the best episodes of the podcast. It's one a lot of people have responded to as well. I brought Hans back for a later episode, and I've debated whether or not to bring him back again. So sit back, grab a glass of Diet Cranberry Sprite, and listen to the Dead Rabbit Radio classic episode. Enjoy. Crazy duels, an unspeakable crime. And then we'll take a look at probably one of the worst conspiracies since World War II never happened. Monkeys don't exist. Today on Dead Rabbit Radio. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Dead Rabbit Radio. I'm your host, Jason Carpenter. I'm having a great day. I hope you're having a great day too. We're still running our episodes a little bit different right now. Not in our normal format, because like I said before, my work schedule's changed a bit and I'm trying to find the right rhythm. So this is also going to be one of those episodes. This episode is going to be a little bit different. Now, I found a folder on one of my computers called New News, and it was web pages that I downloaded, because I always was afraid stuff was going to get memory hold and information was just going to disappear. I had a folder of downloaded articles, and it was entitled New News, and it's ironic because all the articles in there are from the year 2004. So they're all super old articles, but I've found a lot of really weird news stories that I saved from that time, and we're going to be covering them periodically. We're going to do probably quite a few this week because they're just shorter stories, and yeah, there's just some bizarre stuff in there. Like,